The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty Montana plains as Sarah Whitmore stood before the weathered courthouse, her trembling hands clutching a small leather satchel. The year was 1883, and at 24, she was already a widow, her late husband having succumbed to consumption the previous winter. The black mourning dress she wore had faded to a dusty gray, much like her prospects in this unforgiving land. Beside her stood Elwood Hartley, a man who commanded respect through wealth rather than warmth. At 43, he was nearly twice her age, with steel-gray hair and eyes that calculated rather than admired. His first wife had died in childbirth 3 years prior, leaving him with vast holdings but no heir. He needed a wife. Sarah needed survival. "You understand the arrangement, Mrs. Whitmore?" Elwood's voice carried the same tone he might use when purchasing cattle. "You'll have your plot of land by the forest edge for your brother Thomas to farm. In return, you'll manage my household and fulfill all duties expected of a wife." Sarah nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She thought of Tom, barely 17, trying to scratch a living from the barren soil their father had left them. This marriage was their only chance. Love was a luxury she could no longer afford. The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by the justice of the peace and his clerk. No flowers adorned the courthouse, no well-wishers gathered outside. Sarah signed her name with a steady hand, though her heart raced like a trapped bird. When Elwood placed a simple gold band on her finger, it felt heavier than iron shackles. The ride to the Hartley Ranch took most of the day. Elwood's property stretched for miles, bordered by pine forests to the north and the snow-capped Rockies in the distance. The main house stood like a fortress against the elements, 2 stories of timber and stone, imposing and cold despite the warm September afternoon. "This is Martha," Elwood said, introducing a severe-looking woman in her 50s. "She manages the kitchen and household staff. You'll coordinate with her, though I expect you to take full responsibility for all domestic matters within the month." Martha's eyes swept over Sarah with barely concealed disdain, taking in the worn boots and mended gloves. "Yes, Mr. Hartley," she said, though her gaze never left Sarah. "I'll show Mrs. Hartley to her quarters." The word quarters struck Sarah like a slap. Even in marriage, she was to have separate rooms from her husband. She followed Martha up the dark wooden staircase, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors who seemed to judge her with painted eyes. Her room was spacious but austere, a bed with a quilted coverlet, a washstand, a wardrobe, and a single chair by the window. No personal touches softened the space. No hint of the woman who had lived here before. "Dinner is at 6 sharp," Martha informed her. "Mr. Hartley expects punctuality. Your belongings will be brought up shortly." She paused at the door. "And Mrs. Hartley, Mr. Hartley prefers his women quiet and obedient." The last one learned that too late. That first dinner was an exercise in endurance. Sarah sat at the far end of the long dining table, the distance between her and Elwood seeming to stretch for miles. He ate methodically, cutting his beef into precise squares, while she picked at her food, her appetite crushed by the oppressive silence. "Tomorrow, you'll begin learning the household accounts," Elwood said without looking up. "I expect detailed records of every expenditure. Waste is not tolerated on this ranch." "Yes, Mr. Hartley." "You'll also oversee the preparation of supply packages for the trappers in the mountain regions. They're rough men, but they provide valuable pelts. The packages go out twice monthly. Martha will show you what's required." Sarah nodded, filing away this information. At least it would give her tasks to fill the long days ahead. That night, Elwood came to her room. She had expected it, had steeled herself for this part of their bargain. He was not cruel, but neither was he gentle. He took what he considered his due with the same mechanical efficiency he applied to all aspects of his life. When he finished, he left without a word, and Sarah lay in the darkness, feeling more alone than she had even in the days after her first husband's death. The routine established itself quickly. Days blended into weeks as Sarah learned to navigate Elwood's expectations. She managed the household accounts with meticulous care, supervised the preparation of meals he never complimented, and endured his twice-weekly visits to her bed. The promised land for Tom had been transferred as agreed, and her brother had written once to thank her, though his words carried an undercurrent of guilt. It was on a crisp October morning when Elwood first mentioned the mountain trappers personally. "You'll take the supply package yourself this time," he announced over breakfast. "The usual boy is sick, and these men can't wait. Follow the northern trail past the big pine grove. There are 3 cabins about 2 miles up. Leave the supplies at each door and return immediately. Don't engage with the men if you see them. They're not suitable company for a respectable woman." Sarah felt a flutter of something. Fear, perhaps, or maybe anticipation of escaping the house's suffocating walls. She loaded the packages onto the pack mule, checking the contents as Martha had taught her: flour, salt, coffee, ammunition, tobacco, and whiskey. Basic necessities for men who chose isolation over civilization. The trail wound through stands of lodgepole pines and aspens, already turning gold. The air grew cooler as she climbed, scented with pine resin and the earthy decay of fallen leaves. For the first time since her marriage, Sarah felt her shoulders relax, her breathing deepen. Out here, away from Elwood's calculating gaze and Martha's disapproval, she could almost remember who she used to be. The first 2 cabins were clearly marked and obviously empty, smoke-free chimneys indicating their owners were out checking trap lines. Sarah left the packages as instructed, but as she approached the 3rd cabin, nestled deeper in the woods, she heard it, a low, dangerous growl that made her blood freeze. A massive grizzly bear emerged from the brush not 30 feet away, its small eyes fixed on her and the mule. Sarah's mount whinnied in terror, backing up and pulling at the lead rope. The bear rose on its hind legs, easily 8 feet tall, its mouth open to reveal yellowed fangs. Sarah couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Death stood before her in the form of 600 pounds of muscle and fury. The bear dropped to all 4s, preparing to charge. Then, cutting through the morning air came a sound unlike anything she'd ever heard. A long, low whistle that seemed to come from the earth itself. The bear's head swiveled toward the trees, and another whistle answered from a different direction. The massive animal huffed, confused, then slowly backed away before turning and lumbering into the forest. A man emerged from the shadow of the pines, moving with the quiet grace of someone who belonged to these mountains. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that touched his collar and a full beard that couldn't hide the sharp angles of his face. His clothes were practical leather and wool worn soft with use, and he carried a rifle with the easy familiarity of a natural extension of his arm. "You hurt?" His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder. Sarah found her voice. "No, Thank you. How did you—" Bears don't like being surrounded. The whistles made her think there were more of us. His eyes, she noticed, were the color of mountain lakes, deep blue-green and utterly calm. "You're Hartley's new wife." It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded, suddenly aware of how she must look. Windblown, frightened. Nothing like the composed ranch mistress she was supposed to be. "Jack Redfern," he said, not offering his hand, maintaining a respectful distance. "That's my cabin there. You best leave the supplies and head back. Storm's coming in." She looked at the clear sky, confused. He almost smiled. "You'll learn to read the signs if you stay long enough. The birds know. The wind knows." He paused, studying her with those remarkable eyes. "Though something tells me you weren't meant for staying." The words hung between them, carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. Sarah felt exposed, as if this stranger could see through the facade of her arranged marriage to the woman underneath, who yearned for something more than ledgers and loneliness. "I should go," she said, though her feet seemed reluctant to move. "Yes," he agreed, but he didn't turn away. "Be careful on the trail. And Mrs. Hartley, next time you come up here, make noise as you walk. Bears prefer warning." As Sarah led the mule back down the mountain, she could feel his eyes on her until the trees swallowed the trail. Her hands trembled on the rope, but not from fear of the bear. Jack Redfern had looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. Not as property or a means to an end, but as a woman worth saving. That night, as Elwood recited ranch business over dinner, Sarah found her mind wandering to a pair of blue-green eyes and a whistle that could turn away death. When Elwood came to her room, she closed her eyes and imagined the scent of pine and leather instead of pomade and tobacco. And when he left, she lay awake wondering what it meant that a stranger's few words had awakened something in her she'd thought her first husband had taken to his grave. Outside, the storm Jack Redfern had predicted rolled in, bringing the first snow of the season. Sarah watched from her window as the flakes fell, each one a small, perfect promise that nothing in this hard land stayed the same forever. 2 weeks passed before Sarah found another excuse to venture into the mountains. The regular supply boy had recovered, but she convinced Elwood that she needed to verify the inventory personally, claiming discrepancies in Martha's records. He had grunted his approval, too absorbed in a cattle contract to pay her much attention. The October air bit sharper now, carrying the promise of a hard winter. Sarah had traded her thin shawl for a proper wool coat, though she told herself it was purely practical. As she guided the mule up the familiar trail, she made noise as Jack had suggested, humming an old hymn her mother used to sing, letting her boots scuff against loose stones. The first 2 cabins remained empty as before. Sarah left the packages and continued toward the third, her heart beating faster with each step. Smoke rose from Jack's chimney this time, a thin gray line against the crystal sky. She hesitated at the clearing's edge, suddenly uncertain. What excuse did she have for lingering? What would a respectable married woman say to a man who lived alone in the wilderness? The door opened before she could decide. Jack stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his elbows despite the cold, a carving knife in one hand. His expression showed no surprise at seeing her. "Mrs. Hartley," he said, nodding. "Coffee's on if you've a mind to warm up before heading back." She should refuse. Every rule of propriety demanded it. Instead, she heard herself saying, "That's kind of you, Mr. Redfern, just for a moment." His cabin was sparse but clean. One room served all purposes. A narrow bed in the corner, a rough table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with traps and tools, but there were unexpected touches of care. A Bible on the windowsill, dried wildflowers in a tin cup, a small carved wooden horse that suggested patient hands and winter evenings. Jack poured coffee into 2 enamel cups, his movements economical and sure. "Storm treated you fair, I hope?" "Yes, though Elwood, Mr. Hartley, lost some cattle to the cold." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, inhaling the bitter comfort. "Do you not feel the isolation here?" "Man chooses his isolation," Jack said, settling into the opposite chair. "Some find it in crowds, some in marriage, some in mountains. At least here, it's honest." The words stung with truth. Sarah looked away, catching sight of the wooden horse. "You carve?" "Passes the time. That one's meant for my nephew in Oregon." "Haven't seen him in 3 years, but his mother writes that he likes horses." A shadow crossed his face. "Family's complicated when you choose this life." "Why did you choose it?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Jack was quiet for a long moment, studying the grain of the table. "Had a wife once, Mary, sweet little thing, all sunshine and laughter. We had a farm in Kansas, nothing grand but ours. Then the fever came through in 78, took her and the baby she was carrying. After that," he shrugged, "mountains don't ask questions, don't make promises they can't keep." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, understanding flooding through her. They were both refugees from loss, though their cages looked different. "Nothing to be sorry for. We all carry our ghosts." His eyes met hers, though some ghosts wear wedding rings. She should have been offended. Instead, tears pricked her eyes. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows the look. He stood, refilling her cup, though she hadn't asked. "How long since your first husband passed?" 10 months. The words came easier than expected. "William was a good man, kind. We had 2 years together before the consumption took him. Now I have a new name, a fine house, and—" She stopped, unable to voice the emptiness. "And a brother with farmland." Jack finished gently. "We do what we must to survive. No shame in that." "Isn't there?" The bitterness surprised her. "I sold myself as surely as any—" "You made a choice to save your family," he interrupted firmly. "That takes courage. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you different." They sat in companionable silence, the coffee cooling between them. Outside, a wind picked up, rattling the windows. Sarah knew she should leave, but the warmth of the cabin held more than physical comfort. Here was someone who understood the weight of loss, the price of survival. "I should go," she finally said, though her voice lacked conviction. "Yes," Jack agreed, but he moved to a shelf, pulling down a small object. "Take this. For the trail." It was a whistle, carved from antler, worn smooth with use. "If you meet trouble, bear, cat, or man, blow 3 times. Sound carries up here. Someone will hear." Their fingers brushed as she took it, a spark of warmth that had nothing to do with the fire. Sarah tucked the whistle into her pocket, the weight of it feeling like a promise. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the gift. The ride back seemed shorter. Those shadows grew long by the time she reached the ranch. Elwood was waiting on the porch, his face dark with suspicion. "You were gone longer than necessary," he said, words clipped with control. "The trail was difficult. The mule stumbled." The lie came smoothly, tasting of betrayal and necessity. His eyes narrowed. "See that it doesn't happen again. A wife's place is in the home, not gallivanting through the mountains." That night, his visit to her room was rougher, his hands possessive rather than indifferent. Sarah endured it as she always did, but when he left, she retrieved the whistle from her hidden pocket, running her fingers over the smooth surface. Somewhere in the mountains, Jack Redfern was carving by firelight, alone but not lonely. The thought gave her strength. Over the following weeks, Sarah found reasons to make the mountain trip whenever possible. A forgotten item here, a special request there. Elwood grew increasingly irritated but couldn't find fault with her diligence in other matters. The household ran smoothly, the accounts balanced perfectly. If she sometimes smelled of pine and fresh air, well, the trail was long. She and Jack developed a rhythm of careful friendship. Coffee when the weather was cold. Conversation that skirted the dangerous edges of their growing connection. He taught her to read weather signs, how mare's tail clouds meant change coming, how animals moved different before a storm. She told him about books she'd read, about her mother's garden in Ohio, about dreams she'd had before life narrowed to survival. "You're different than when you first came," Jack observed one November afternoon. They stood outside his cabin, watching storm clouds mass over the peaks. "There's color in your cheeks again." "The mountain air agrees with me," Sarah said, but they both knew it was more than that. Sarah, her name on his lips was a revelation. Not Mrs. Hartley, not William's widow, just Sarah. "This is dangerous. What we're doing—" "We're doing nothing wrong. Sharing coffee. Talking. You know that's not all it is." His voice was rough with restraint. "I see how you look at me. God help me. You have to know how I—" He stopped, jaw clenched. She turned to face him fully, heart racing. "How you what? How I wait for the sound of that mule? How I watch the trail every supply day, hoping to see you. How I lie awake thinking about—" He stepped back abruptly. "I won't dishonor you. Won't make you an adulteress, no matter how much I—" "Jack." She reached out, stopped, let her hand fall. "I know. I feel it too. But you're right. We can't." The space between them hummed with unspoken want. Finally. Jack moved to the wood pile, picking up his axe. "You should go. Storm's coming in fast." Sarah mounted the mule, her chest tight with suppressed emotion. As she reached the tree line, she looked back. Jack stood watching, axe forgotten, looking like a man carved from the mountain itself. That night, the storm hit with unexpected fury. Sarah lay in her bed listening to the wind howl, clutching the whistle. She thought of Jack alone in his cabin. wondered if he was thinking of her. When Elwood's footsteps paused outside her door, she held her breath, but for once, he moved on. Perhaps even he could sense the charge in the air, the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. 3 days later, word came from town. Jack Redfern had been injured, found by another trapper lying unconscious beside the trail, his rifle beside him and blood staining the snow. He'd been taken to his cabin but needed tending. "Send the boy with extra medical supplies," Elwood ordered over breakfast. "The boy's still weak from his illness," Sarah said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "I'll go. I've made the trip enough times to know the way." Elwood's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Absolutely not. It's inappropriate for a married woman to tend an unmarried man." "Then he'll die." The words came out sharp, desperate. "Is that what you want? To lose a valuable trapper because of propriety? Who'll bring in the beaver pelts you sell for such profit?" They stared at each other across the breakfast table. A silent battle of wills. Finally, Elwood set down his fork. "You'll take Martha with you," he said coldly, "and you'll return before nightfall. Any delay, any impropriety, and there will be consequences. For you and your brother." Sarah's blood chilled at the threat, but she nodded. "Of course, husband, I understand perfectly." As she prepared for the journey, loading medical supplies with shaking hands, Sarah touched the whistle in her pocket. She'd sworn she wouldn't dishonor her marriage vows, but faced with Jack's injury, she knew the truth. She would risk Elwood's wrath, society's condemnation, even her brother's future, if it meant saving the man who had reminded her what it felt like to be alive. The storm had passed, leaving the world crystalline and dangerous. As Sarah urged the mule up the mountain trail, Martha complaining behind her, she prayed to a God she wasn't sure still listened. "Let him live," she bargained. "Let him live, and I'll find the strength to stay away." But even as she made the promise, she knew it for a lie. Some chains, once loosened, could never be refastened, and somewhere in the mountains, Jack Redfern lay bleeding, waiting for her to come. The scent of blood hit Sarah before she even entered the cabin. Martha hung back at the doorway, her face pale beneath her bonnet, but Sarah pushed forward into the dim interior. Jack lay on his narrow bed, unconscious, his chest wrapped in crude bandages already soaked through with crimson. His face was gray beneath the tan, lips cracked and dry. "Fetch water from the stream," Sarah ordered Martha, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "And bring in the medical supplies, quickly." For once, Martha obeyed without argument. Sarah moved to Jack's side, gently peeling back the bandages to reveal a deep gash along his ribs. A glancing blow from a bear's claw. By the look of it, not immediately fatal, but infection in these mountains meant death as surely as any bullet.
"Jack,"
she whispered, touching his burning forehead.
"Jack, can you hear me?"
His eyelids fluttered, and for a moment those blue-green eyes focused on her. "Sarah?" His voice was barely a rasp. "You shouldn't be here. Hush, save your strength." Martha returned with water, her movements efficient despite her obvious discomfort. Together they cleaned the wound, Sarah drawing on half-remembered knowledge from tending William during his illness. She packed the gash with carbolic salve and clean bandages, trying not to think about how Jack's skin felt beneath her hands, how even in injury, he radiated a warmth that Elwood's touch never carried. "He needs willow bark tea for the fever," Sarah told Martha. "And the wound must be cleaned twice daily or it'll fester." "We can't stay," Martha protested. "Mister," Hartley was clear. "Then I'll stay alone." The words left Sarah's mouth before she could stop them. "You can tell Elwood I insisted, that I threatened to report his unsafe working conditions to the territorial authorities if he let a man die for the sake of appearances." Martha's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare, wouldn't I?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "I've already lost one man to illness. I won't stand by and watch another die when I could prevent it." They stared at each other, mistress and housekeeper, until Martha looked away. "I'll tell Mister," Hartley, you'll return tomorrow, she said stiffly. But mark my words, there'll be consequences for this defiance. After Martha left, Sarah built up the fire and set water to boiling for tea. Jack drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes calling for Mary, sometimes mumbling about storms and traps. Sarah bathed his face with cool cloths, spooned willow bark tea between his cracked lips, and kept vigil as shadows lengthened across the cabin floor. Near midnight, his fever broke. Jack's eyes opened, lucid this time, taking in Sarah's presence by his bedside. "You stayed," he said wonderingly. "You were dying." She adjusted his blankets with hands that trembled slightly. "What happened?" "So with Cubs. Surprised her near the den. Stupid mistake." He tried to sit up, winced, fell back. "Sarah, you have to go. If Hartley finds out." "He already knows. I'll face his anger tomorrow. Tonight, you need care. I won't have you ruined for me." "Then you should have thought of that before you made me care whether you lived or died." The words came out sharper than intended, carrying too much truth. Jack's hand found hers, rough fingers gentle. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For wanting what I can't have. For being too weak to stay away from you. We're both weak, then." Sarah didn't pull her hand back. "I tell myself every day to stop coming here, to be the dutiful wife Elwood bought. But then I think of you alone in these mountains, and I can't breathe for wanting things I have no right to want." "What do you want?" His voice was soft, dangerous. Sarah closed her eyes. "I want to wake up without dread. I want to laugh again, really laugh. I want to feel like a woman instead of a ledger entry. I want—" She opened her eyes, met his. "I want to know what it's like to be touched by someone who sees me." The fire crackled in the silence that followed. Jack's thumb stroked across her knuckles, a touch so light it might have been imagination. "If I were a better man, I'd tell you to forget those wants, to go back to your safe life and never return. And if I were a better woman, I'd listen." Sarah leaned forward, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "But we are who we are. Jack, flawed and wanting and unable to let go." He caught her wrist gently. "Stay. Just tonight. Let me pretend for a few hours that you're mine to protect. Mine to—" He stopped, jaw clenched against words that couldn't be taken back. Sarah knew she should refuse. Every moment she remained increased the danger, the inevitable reckoning with Elwood. But looking at Jack, wounded, vulnerable, yet still trying to protect her honor, she couldn't bring herself to leave. "I'll stay," she whispered. She dozed fitfully in the chair beside his bed, starting awake whenever he stirred. Near dawn. Jack's breathing eased into natural sleep, the fever fully broken. Sarah stretched cramped muscles and moved to build up the dying fire. "You look like an angel in the firelight," Jack said softly. She turned to find him watching her, more alert than he'd been since her arrival. "Angels don't have cabin dirt under their fingernails or hair like a bird's nest. Mine would." He shifted carefully, testing his bandages. "Sarah, what happens now? We can't keep pretending this is innocent friendship." "I know." She returned to the chair, folding her hands to keep from reaching for him. "But I also know that when I thought you might die, nothing else mattered. Not my reputation, not Elwood's threats, not even Tom's land, just you. I won't be your ruin. You already are." The admission hung between them, undeniable. "Every time Elwood touches me, I think of your hands. When he speaks, I hear your voice. I'm already ruined. Jack, the only question is whether I'll have something real to show for it. If you were free, but I'm not." Sarah stood abruptly. "I should check your bandages." Her hands shook as she unwound the cloth. The wound looked better. No signs of infection setting in. She applied fresh salve, trying to ignore the way Jack's breathing changed when her fingers brushed his skin. The intimacy of the act, tending his body, learning the geography of scars and muscle, felt more profound than any marriage vow she'd spoken. "There," she said, securing the last bandage. "You'll need to keep it clean and—" Jack caught her hand, drew it to his lips. The kiss he pressed to her palm was gentle, reverent, and it undid her completely. Tears slipped down her cheeks as years of loneliness and loss crashed over her like spring flood. "Don't cry," Jack whispered, pulling her down until she sat on the edge of the bed. "Please don't cry for what we can't have. I'm crying for what we already do." She touched his face, memorizing the feel of his beard, the warmth of his skin. "This feeling, it's real, isn't it? It's not just loneliness finding company. It's the most real thing I've felt since Mary died." His eyes held hers, unflinching. "I love you, Sarah. God help us both, but I do, and that's why you have to go back. Today, and not return. Jack, listen to me." His voice grew urgent. "Hartley suspicious already. Men like him don't tolerate defiance. He'll hurt you, or worse, hurt your brother to punish you. I won't have that on my conscience. And what about my conscience? Knowing you're here, alone, wounded. I'll heal." "I've survived worse." He squeezed her hand. "But I won't survive knowing I caused your destruction. Please, Sarah, if you love me at all, stay away." The plea in his eyes broke her heart. She wanted to refuse, to fight, to choose love over safety. But the mention of Tom stopped her. Her brother was innocent in all this, building a future on the land her sacrifice had bought. Could she risk his dreams for her own selfish desires? "I'll try," she whispered, though the words tasted like ash. "But I make no promises. My heart doesn't seem to obey my will where you're concerned." Jack pulled her down until their foreheads touched, sharing breath in the pale dawn light. For a moment, Sarah thought he might kiss her properly, might finally break the last barrier between them. Instead, he released her with visible effort. "Go," he said roughly, "before I forget every noble intention I've ever had." Sarah stood on trembling legs, gathered her supplies. At the door, she turned back. Jack lay watching her, his expression a mixture of love and resignation that would haunt her dreams. "I left a handkerchief," she said quietly, "the one with violets embroidered on it. If you change your mind about wanting me to stay away, leave it where I can see it, where we first met, by the big pine." "Sarah, I know what you said, but I also know that noble intentions are cold comfort on winter nights. The choice is yours." "Jack, it always has been." She left before he could respond, before her own resolve could crumble. The ride back to the ranch passed in a blur of tears and determination. By the time she reached the house, the sun was well up, and Elwood waited on the porch like judgment itself. "Inside," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." Sarah handed the mule's reins to the stable boy and followed her husband into his study. The door closed with the finality of a prison cell, and she knew that whatever came next would test every ounce of strength she possessed. But somewhere in the mountains, a wounded man held a handkerchief embroidered with violets, and that small rebellion was worth any price she might pay. The reckoning had come, but Sarah faced it with Jack's kiss still warm on her palm and a wild hope in her heart that refused to be tamed. The study door closed with finality. Elwood stood behind his massive oak desk, hands clasped behind his back, the picture of controlled fury. Sarah had seen this stance before, when dealing with defaulting debtors or disobedient ranch hands. Now she was the subject of his cold assessment. "Explain yourself," he said, each word precise as a blade. "A man was dying. I have nursing experience from tending my late husband. It would have been unchristian to let Mr. Redfern perish for the sake of propriety." "Propriety?" Elwood's laugh was harsh. "You dare speak of propriety? Martha tells me you sent her away, that you spent the night alone with that mountain savage. He was unconscious with fever. There was nothing improper." The slap came without warning, snapping Sarah's head to the side. She tasted copper where her teeth cut her cheek. "Do not lie to me." Elwood's composure cracked, revealing the ugliness beneath. "I've seen how you look when you return from those supply runs. Flushed, alive, the way you never look in my bed." Sarah straightened slowly, hand pressed to her stinging cheek. "I've fulfilled every wifely duty you've required. I've managed your household, balanced your accounts, submitted to your visits. What more do you want from me? Loyalty, obedience, the understanding that you belong to me. He moved around the desk, each step measured. You seem to have forgotten that you're not the grieving widow anymore. You're Mrs. Elwood Hartley, and that position comes with expectations. I haven't forgotten. Sarah lifted her chin, finding courage in her anger. How could I, when you remind me with every word, every look, that I'm property you purchased? His hand shot out, gripping her arm hard enough to bruise. Property? Yes, that's exactly what you are. And like any property that proves defective, you can be replaced. Then replace me. The words erupted from somewhere deep, reckless. Find another desperate woman to warm your bed and count your money. But you won't, will you? Because a divorce would damage your reputation. The great Elwood Hartley, unable to keep a wife in line. His face darkened to purple. For a moment, Sarah thought he might strike her again. Instead, he released her arm with a shove that sent her stumbling. You're right. Divorce would be inconvenient, but there are other ways to handle a disobedient wife. He returned to his desk, pulling out a sheet of paper. Your brother Thomas, he's doing well on that land, I hear. Be a shame if I had to call in the loan. Sarah's blood turned to ice. You gave that land as part of our marriage agreement. I gave it with conditions. Your compliance was assumed. He dipped a pen in ink, poised to write. One letter to my lawyer, and your brother loses everything. Is your mountain man worth that? There's nothing between Mr. Redfern and myself, Sarah said desperately. I swear to you. Your word means nothing. Elwood set down the pen, studying her. But I'm willing to be merciful. You'll have no more contact with the mountain trappers. Martha will handle the supply runs from now on. You'll confine yourself to the house except for Sunday services. And tonight, you'll move into my bedroom permanently. The last pronouncement hit like a physical blow. Sarah's separate room had been her only sanctuary, the only space where she could drop her mask. Elwood, please. Those are my terms. Accept them, or I'll have your brother evicted by week's end. Choose. Sarah closed her eyes, seeing Tom's eager face when he'd written about the first sprouting crops, seeing Jack's eyes when he'd told her to stay away. Everyone she cared about would suffer if she refused. I accept, she whispered, louder and properly. I accept your terms. Husband. Good. Now get out of my sight. Have your things moved by dinner. Sarah fled the study, maintaining composure until she reached her room. Only then did she allow herself to cry, muffling sobs in her pillow. The bars of her cage had tightened, and now even the illusion of privacy would be stripped away. That night, she stood in Elwood's bedroom, now their bedroom, watching Martha and another maid transfer her belongings. Her few personal items looked pathetic in the masculine space. Her mother's silver brush, the Bible William had given her, a small watercolor of Ohio wildflowers. No trace of the embroidered handkerchiefs. She'd hidden those beneath a loose floorboard. The only rebellion left to her. Elwood watched from his armchair as she prepared for bed behind the dressing screen. No need for modesty between husband and wife. He called out, "Come here." Sarah emerged in her nightgown, arms wrapped protectively around herself. Elwood beckoned her closer, studying her like a horse at auction. You're still beautiful, he mused. Perhaps I haven't appreciated that enough. Starting tonight, things will be different. You'll learn to be a proper wife. Sarah, one way or another. What followed was worse than his previous mechanical visits. Now there was possession in his touch, a determination to mark her as his. Sarah retreated deep inside herself, thinking of mountain winds and coffee by a simple fire. When it was over, Elwood pulled her against him, arm heavy across her waist. See, not so difficult to be obedient. His breath was hot against her neck. In time, you might even come to enjoy it. Sarah lay rigid, counting heartbeats until his breathing deepened into snores. Only then did she allow silent tears to fall, somewhere in the mountains. Jack was healing, probably believing she'd abandoned him by choice. The handkerchief remained in his cabin, and she had no way to tell him why she couldn't look for it by the pine tree. Days passed in suffocating routine. Sarah moved through household duties like a ghost, always aware of Elwood's watching eyes. Martha reported on the supply runs with barely concealed satisfaction. The mountain men were surly. The weather was terrible. One of the trappers had asked after Mrs. Hartley. That last piece of information, delivered with a sly smile, told Sarah that Jack had recovered enough to check for her. Sunday services provided the only respite. Elwood allowed her to attend church, though he sat beside her like a guard. Sarah prayed desperately for strength, for acceptance, for the ability to endure. But when she closed her eyes during prayer, it was Jack's face she saw, not any saint or savior. 2 weeks into her new captivity, Elwood announced a business trip to Billings. 3 days, he said over breakfast. Martha will watch you. 1 hint of disobedience, and she has instructions to wire me immediately. Sarah nodded dutifully, but her heart raced. 3 days, the first freedom in weeks. She maintained her subdued demeanor until Elwood's carriage disappeared down the road, then turned to find Martha watching her with suspicion. Don't even think about it, the older woman warned. I'll be checking your room every hour. But even Martha had to sleep. That night, Sarah waited until the house settled into silence, then crept from the bed she'd come to hate. She dressed quickly in her darkest clothes, pinning her hair severely back. From beneath the floorboard, she retrieved one of the violet handkerchiefs and the antler whistle Jack had given her. The moon was new, providing perfect cover as she slipped from the house. She couldn't take a horse. The noise would wake someone. Instead, she ran on foot, following the well-worn road by memory and desperation. 2 hours of stumbling through darkness brought her to the mountain trail. Her legs burned, her lungs ached, but she pressed on. Dawn was breaking when she reached the big pine. Her heart sank. No handkerchief fluttered from the branches. But as she turned to leave, she saw it, tied low on a young aspen, hidden from casual view. The violet handkerchief, slightly faded but unmistakable. Sarah's knees nearly buckled with relief. She pressed the cloth to her face, inhaling the faint scent of wood smoke and pine that clung to it. Jack hadn't given up. He was waiting, hoping, just as she was. She couldn't go to his cabin. Martha might check the trappers as part of her surveillance, but she could leave a message. With trembling fingers, she tied her own handkerchief where Jack's had been, adding the whistle beside it. He would understand. Danger, but also devotion. The journey back was harder, exhaustion and emotion taking their toll. Sarah barely made it to the house before full daylight, collapsing into bed still fully clothed. When Martha knocked an hour later for the morning check, she feigned sleep, praying the woman wouldn't notice her muddy boots hidden beneath the bed. That day passed in a haze. Sarah performed her duties mechanically, aware of Martha's increased vigilance. Had she noticed something? The housekeeper said nothing, but her eyes held new calculation. The second night, Sarah didn't dare leave again. She lay in the bed that smelled of Elwood's pomade and tried to find comfort in knowing Jack had received her message. Tomorrow, Elwood would return, and her brief window of hope would close. But at least Jack knew she hadn't abandoned him by choice. Near midnight, a sound made her sit upright. A low whistle, almost like wind through the eaves, but with a pattern she recognized. 3 long notes, a pause, then 3 more. The emergency signal Jack had taught her. Sarah crept to the window, peering into the darkness. There, a shadow by the barn, separate from the others. Her heart hammered as she recognized the tall figure. Jack had come to her, risking everything. She grabbed a shawl and slipped out through the servants' entrance, every nerve screaming danger. Jack waited in the deepest shadows, his face grave in the starlight.
You shouldn't be here,
she whispered urgently.
If they catch you.
I had to know. His voice was rough with emotion.
The handkerchief. Then you disappeared. I thought.
He broke off, hands clenching. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm watched, guarded. He knows. Jack. Maybe not everything, but enough. The words tumbled out in a rush. He's moved me to his room, threatens Tom's land if I disobey. I can't. Jack pulled her into the shadows of the barn, his hands gentle on her shoulders. This close. She could see the new lines around his eyes, the weight he carried. We'll run, he said fiercely. Tonight. Get whatever you can carry and come with me. We'll go to Canada. Start fresh where he can't reach us. My brother. I'll get word to Tom. Tell him to be ready to move if needed. There are ways to protect him. Jack's thumb stroked her shoulders through the thin shawl. Sarah, this is killing you. I can see it. You're disappearing bit by bit. She wanted to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. And if we run, we'd be fugitives. You'd be wanted for stealing another man's wife. We'd never have peace. Peace? Jack's laugh was bitter. What peace do we have now? At least we'd be together. At least you'd be free. The barn door creaked. They froze, but it was only wind. Still, the reminder of danger made Sarah step back. I can't, she whispered, hating herself. Not yet, not with Tom at risk. But Jack, she gripped his hands. I'm not giving up. I just need time to think, to plan. Can you wait? Can you? I'll wait forever if needed. He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing each palm. But Sarah, if he hurts you, truly hurts you, promise you'll run. With or without me, promise you'll save yourself. I promise, she lied, knowing she would endure anything rather than see Jack hunted for her sake. A light flared in the house, someone lighting a lamp. Sarah's blood turned cold. Go, now, before they see you. Sarah, go! She pushed him toward the darkness. I'll find a way. I swear I will. But not if you're caught here. Jack caught her face between his hands, and for one perfect, terrible moment, kissed her. It was desperate and tender and everything their careful friendship had denied. Sarah tasted love and loss and impossible dreams before he pulled away. That's what you're worth, he said roughly. Remember that when he tries to make you feel like property. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness with the skill of a man bred to wilderness. Sarah stood shaking in the barn's shadow, fingers pressed to lips that still burned. Through the window, she saw Martha's silhouette moving through the house, checking rooms. Sarah slipped back inside, hanging her shawl carefully, smoothing her hair. By the time Martha reached the bedroom, she was beneath the covers, feigning sleep. But her heart raced with new determination. Jack was right. She was disappearing, but now she had his kiss to remember, his promise to wait. Elwood might own her body, might control her days, but her spirit remained her own. And somehow, some way, she would find a path to freedom. The violets on her hidden handkerchiefs would bloom again, even if she had to water them with tears and patience. Love had found her in the most impossible circumstances. Now she had to find the courage to claim it, no matter the cost. Elwood returned from Billings in a black mood. The business deal had soured, and he took his frustration out on everyone in his path. Sarah bore the brunt of it, criticized for the temperature of his coffee, the arrangement of his papers, the way she breathed. That night, his attentions were particularly cruel, leaving bruises that her high-necked dresses would hide. You've been different, he said afterward, studying her in the lamplight. Quiet, obedient, yet somehow defiant, like a horse that's been broken but still remembers running wild. Sarah kept her eyes on the ceiling. I've done everything you asked. Yeah, and that troubles me. He traced a finger along her jaw, making her shudder. Martha mentioned you were restless while I was gone, walking the grounds at odd hours. I couldn't sleep. The house feels close sometimes. Elwood settled back against the pillows. Perhaps you need more occupation. I've invited Judge Morrison and his wife for dinner next week. You'll prove what an exemplary wife you've become. Any embarrassment, any hint of impropriety, and your brother will suffer. Understood? Yes, husband. But as Sarah lay sleepless beside him, she knew her time was running out. Each day brought new restrictions, new humiliations. The bruises on her body were nothing compared to the slow death of her spirit. Jack's kiss haunted her, a reminder of what tenderness could be. She had to act soon, before Elwood's suspicions crystallized into something worse. The next morning brought unexpected opportunity. One of the ranch hands burst into the breakfast room, hat in hand. "Mr. Hartley, sir, we got trouble at the north pasture. Fence down, cattle scattered into the forest. Looks like wolves, maybe a whole pack." Elwood cursed, pushing back from the table. "How many head?" "Can't say for certain. Storm last night made tracking difficult. We'll need every man to round them up." "Martha," Elwood barked, "you'll accompany me to oversee the food for the search parties. Sarah, you'll remain here. Lock the doors and don't open them for anyone until we return." Sarah kept her expression neutral. "Of course. How long will you be gone?" "However long it takes. Could be overnight if the cattle have scattered far." He fixed her with a hard stare. "Remember what I said about obedience. One of the stable boys will stay behind to watch the house." But fate smiled on Sarah. Within an hour of Elwood's departure, the stable boy was violently ill, Martha's heavy breakfast sitting poorly with the whiskey he'd snuck the night before. Sarah tended him with false concern, mixing a draught that would ensure he slept deeply. As soon as his snores filled the servants' quarters, Sarah flew into action. She couldn't take much. It would slow her down. A change of clothes, what little money she'd hidden, her mother's brush, the Bible from William. Everything else was Elwood's, had always been Elwood's. She dressed in her darkest, warmest clothes, pinning her hair severely back, from beneath the floorboard. She retrieved her last violet handkerchief, pressing it to her heart. Then she took paper and pen, writing 2 letters with shaking hands. The first was to Tom. "Dear brother, by the time you read this, I will be gone. I cannot explain everything, but know that I am safe and following my heart. Elwood may try to take your land in revenge. I've enclosed what money I have. Use it to travel to Oregon if needed. Our cousin Samuel will help you start over. Forgive me for bringing trouble to your door. You deserve better than a sister who chose love over duty. Yours, Sarah." The second letter was harder. "Elwood, I leave you as I came, with nothing that is yours. The house is in order, the accounts balanced. You'll find another wife easily, one who can be what you require. I ask only that you leave my brother in peace. He knew nothing of my feelings or my plans. If you must have revenge, let it fall on me alone. Do not look for me. I am beyond your reach now, in ways you never understood. Sarah." She left both letters on Elwood's desk, weighing them down with his paperweight. A bronze eagle with spread wings. How fitting that freedom should hold down her goodbye. The journey to Jack's cabin took on a dreamlike quality. Sarah moved through familiar trails with new eyes, knowing she would never travel them again as Mrs. Elwood Hartley. Snow began falling as she climbed, soft flakes that covered her tracks like a blessing. Jack was splitting wood when she emerged from the trees. He looked up, axe frozen mid-swing, his face cycling through disbelief, joy, and fear. "Sarah, I've left him." The words came out steady despite her shaking. "I've burned every bridge. Jack, there's no going back." The axe fell from his hands. In 3 strides, he reached her, pulling her against him as if she might vanish. "What happened? Did he hurt you?" "No more than usual." She pressed her face into his chest, breathing in safety. "But I couldn't. I saw what my life would be. Years of slow suffocation, of watching myself disappear. And I realized I'd rather die free with you than live caged with him." Jack pulled back to study her face, his hands gentle as they traced the fading bruise on her jaw. "He'll come after us. Yes, we have maybe a day's lead, less if the cattle are found quickly. Then we move now." Jack's demeanor shifted, becoming the wilderness survivor. "I've got supplies cached along the northern route. We'll take the high passes, harder traveling but harder to track. Can you ride?" "I walked here." "On foot from the ranch?" He shook his head in wonder. "You're stronger than you know. Sarah Whitmore. Not Hartley?" "Never Hartley. Not to me." He kissed her forehead quickly. "Come. We pack light and fast." They worked in efficient tandem, Jack filling packs with essentials while Sarah changed into clothes he provided, men's trousers and wool shirts that would be warmer and more practical than her dresses. She felt strange in the unfamiliar garments, but also liberated, as if shedding more than just fabric. "There's one more thing," Jack said, reaching into a trunk. He pulled out a small leather pouch, heavy with coins. "My savings, 5 years of trapping and trading. It's not much, but it'll get us started wherever we land." "Jack, I can't—" "You're risking everything for us. Let me provide what I can." He secured the pouch inside her pack. "We're partners now, Sarah. Everything I have is yours." They left the cabin as snow began falling harder. Jack had 2 horses, mountain-bred Mustangs that knew the trails. Sarah struggled into the saddle, muscles already sore from her morning trek. "We'll push hard today," Jack warned. "Cover as much ground as possible. Tonight, we shelter in a cave I know. Tomorrow—" He met her eyes. "Tomorrow we'll be in territory Hartley doesn't control." They rode in focused silence, Jack leading through paths Sarah hadn't known existed. The snow was both blessing and curse, hiding their tracks but making travel treacherous. When they stopped to rest the horses, Jack taught her how to read the wilderness signs, how to move quietly, how to think like prey evading a predator. As afternoon waned, they heard it, the distant sound of dogs baying. Sarah's blood ran cold. "He's using hounds. Borrowed from the sheriff, likely." Jack's face was grim. "We need to cross water, break the scent trail. There's a river 2 miles north. If we can reach it—" They pushed the horses harder, Sarah clinging desperately as they navigated increasingly steep terrain. Behind them, the baying grew louder. Her heart pounded with terror and exhilaration. This was it, the moment of choice made manifest. Freedom or capture, love or duty, life or mere existence. The river appeared through the trees, running fast and cold with snowmelt. Jack didn't hesitate, urging his horse into the current. Sarah followed, gasping as icy water soaked through her boots. The horses struggled against the flow, but they were mountain-bred and strong. On the far bank, Jack led them upstream through the shallows for nearly a mile before cutting back into the forest. "That'll slow them," he said. "Buy us time." As darkness fell, they reached the promised cave, a deep cleft in the rock face, invisible unless you knew where to look. Jack tended the horses while Sarah explored their shelter. Someone had used it before. There was a fire ring and stacked wood. "Trapper's Refuge," Jack explained, starting a small fire. "We help each other survive out here." They ate cold biscuits and dried meat, too exhausted for conversation. When Jack spread blankets near the fire, Sarah hesitated. They'd never been truly alone together. Not like this. The cave felt intimate, separate from the world and its rules. "I'll keep watch," Jack said, understanding her uncertainty. "You sleep." "No." Sarah moved to sit beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "We're in this together. I'll take second watch." "Sarah." "I'm not some delicate flower. Jack Redfern. I walked away from everything today. I think I can manage staying awake for a few hours." He smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen all day. "No, you're not delicate. You're mountain storm and spring thunder." Elwood never knew what he had. He knew exactly what he had, property. Sarah stared into the fire. "I was just another acquisition, like his cattle or his land. But you—" She turned to face him. "You see me, the real me, not the widow or the wife or the role I'm supposed to play. I see a woman who risked everything for love," Jack said softly, "who chose the unknown over the unbearable, who makes me believe in second chances." The firelight danced between them, creating a private world of shadow and gold. When Jack opened his arms, Sarah went into them without hesitation. This time, their kiss was different, not desperate or stolen, but claimed. They had chosen each other over safety, over society, over everything the world said was proper and right. When they finally drew apart, Sarah felt reborn. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, "this was worth it. You are worth it." Jack held her close as the fire burned low. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering their tracks and the old world they'd left behind. They took turns keeping watch, but the dogs never came. Perhaps the river had worked, or perhaps Elwood had called off the search for the night. As dawn approached, painting the sky pale pink through the cave mouth, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She was bruised, exhausted, facing an uncertain future as a fugitive. But she was free, free to choose, free to love, free to become whoever she might be beyond the roles others had forced upon her. "Ready?" Jack asked, beginning to pack their supplies. Sarah took one last look at the cave that had sheltered their first night of freedom. Then she turned to face the trail ahead, where mountains rose like promises and the horizon stretched endlessly forward. "Ready?" she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. They mounted their horses and rode into the new day, two souls bound by choice rather than law, by love rather than duty. Behind them lay everything safe and known. Ahead waited hardship, danger, and the constant threat of pursuit. But also ahead waited life, real, authentic, chosen life. And as Sarah followed Jack into the wilderness, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she would rather die in these mountains than live another day in Elwood Hartley's cage. The transformation was complete. Mrs. Hartley was gone, left behind with the letters on a cold desk. In her place rode Sarah Whitmore, woman, lover, free soul. The mountains had claimed her at last, and she went to them with joy. The second day brought harder travel and harsher weather. Snow fell steadily now, transforming the mountain passes into treacherous white corridors. Jack led them through paths that seemed impossible, sometimes dismounting to guide the horses over ice-slicked rocks. Sarah followed without complaint, though her body screamed with exhaustion and cold. Near midday, they stopped to rest in a grove of pines. Jack's face was grave as he studied their back trail. "They're still coming. Saw movement on the ridge an hour back." "How many?" "3, maybe 4 riders. Moving careful but steady." He turned to her, decision clear in his eyes. "We need to split up." "No." The word came out sharp, final. "We stay together or not at all." "Sarah, be practical. I can lead them away. Circle back. And if they catch you, they'll kill you. Jack, you know Elwood's reputation." She gripped his arm. "We chose this together. We face it together." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Together. Then, but we need to reach the canyon before nightfall. After that." He didn't finish, but Sarah understood. After that, they'd be in territory where law meant less than survival. They pushed on, the horses laboring through deepening snow. Sarah lost feeling in her fingers and toes, but she held on, focused on Jack's back ahead of her. He was her compass now, her true north in this white wilderness. The shot came without warning. Sarah's horse screamed and stumbled, a red flower blooming on its flank. She kicked free of the stirrups as the animal fell, rolling into the snow. Jack wheeled back, reaching for his rifle as more shots cracked through the air. "The trees!" he shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm. They ran, bullets whining past like angry hornets. The pine grove offered cover, and Jack pulled her behind a massive trunk. His rifle was already up, returning fire with careful precision. "You hit?" he asked, eyes never leaving the ridgeline. "No." Sarah checked herself to be sure. "My horse? Dead or dying?" His jaw clenched. "They're trying to pin us down." Through the snow, Sarah could see dark shapes moving, spreading out to flank their position. Her heart sank. "It's Elwood, the one in the center. That's his bay stallion. Then he's brought friends." Jack fired again, eliciting a cry from one of the attackers. "Sarah, listen, there's a gorge about 50 yards behind us. If we can reach it, Mr. Redfern." Elwood's voice carried through the storm, cold as the wind. "Send out my wife, and you can go free. This needn't end in bloodshed." Jack's laugh was bitter. "Like hell." "Sarah," Elwood called. "I know you can hear me. Come out now, and I'll forgive this foolishness. Your brother's land remains safe." No one has to die. Sarah started to rise, but Jack pulled her down. Don't, he's lying. I know. She met his eyes. But maybe I can buy us time. Distract them while you… No. Jack's voice was fierce. I won't lose you now. Not when we're so close. Another voice joined Elwood's. Rougher. Amused. Boss, they ain't coming out willing. Let us flush them proper. Very well, mister. Cogan. Elwood's tone turned businesslike. Burn them out if necessary. I want my wife back, alive if possible. The mountain man is yours. Sarah recognized the name. Bert Cogan, a hired gun who did Elwood's dirtiest work. The kind of man who enjoyed hurting people. Fear turned her stomach to ice. We run. Jack decided. On 3, stay low. Zigzag. Ready? She nodded, gripping the pistol he'd given her that morning. It felt alien in her hand, but she'd use it if needed. 1, 2. They burst from cover together. The gorge gaped ahead. A narrow slash in the earth. Bullets churned the snow around them. Jack turned, firing as he ran, trying to give Sarah cover. She heard him grunt, but didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The gorge edge appeared through the snow. Without hesitation, Sarah jumped. The fall was shorter than expected, but still knocked the wind from her. She landed hard on a narrow ledge, ankle twisting beneath her. Jack landed beside her a second later. Cat graceful, even wounded. Blood stained his left shoulder. You're shot! Graze! Move! He pulled her along the ledge, which wound down into the gorge proper. There's a cave system, if we can reach it. Behind them, Elwood's voice rose in fury. Find a way down. They're trapped in there. The ledge narrowed, forcing them to edge along with backs pressed to the rock. Sarah's ankles screamed with each step, but she kept moving. Below, she could hear water, a river rushing through the gorge bottom. There! Jack pointed to a dark opening in the rock face. Inside, quick! The cave was more than a cave. It was a tunnel, leading back into the mountain. Jack produced a candle from his pack, the small flame revealing passages branching in multiple directions. Old mine, he explained, breathing hard. Played out years ago. Easy to get lost if you don't know the way. Do you? Some of it. Enough, maybe. He examined his shoulder, wincing. Can you wrap this? Need to stop the bleeding. Sarah tore strips from her shirt, binding the wound as best she could. Her hands shook, but whether from cold or fear, she couldn't tell. Outside, they could hear voices. Boots on rock. They're coming, she whispered. Jack took her face in his hands, thumbs gentle on her cheeks. Whatever happens, know that I love you. These days with you have been worth any price. Don't talk like that. We're getting out of this. Sarah! She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. We're getting out. Both of us. Now show me these tunnels. They went deeper, Jack marking their path with chalk on the walls. The passages twisted and branched, some ending in dead ends, others opening into vast chambers. Their candle threw dancing shadows that looked like reaching fingers. Then, disaster. As they squeezed through a narrow section, Sarah's pack caught on a projection. She turned to free it, and the movement jarred loose rocks above. Jack saw it coming, shoving her forward as the ceiling came down. When the dust cleared, a wall of stone separated them. Jack! Sarah scrabbled at the rocks, tearing her fingernails. Jack! Answer me! I'm here. His voice came muffled through the barrier. I'm all right, but Sarah, I can't get through. The whole section's unstable. No! Tears streamed down her face. There has to be another way. Listen to me. Follow the left passage. It leads to an opening near the river. Go north along the water until you find… I'm not leaving you. You have to. His voice was calm, resigned. They'll dig me out eventually. But you can escape. You can be free. Not without you. Sarah pressed against the rocks as if she could will them away. Jack, please, there has to be something. Sarah, my love, my brave, beautiful storm. You gave me back my heart when I thought it was dead forever. Let me give you your freedom in return.
I can't. I won't.
You can, and you will. She heard him shift on the other side. Because if you don't, it all means nothing. Every risk, every choice. Don't let Elwood win. Live. Sarah. Live free for both of us. The sound of voices echoed from the tunnel behind her. They'd found the entrance. Go, Jack urged. Now, please. Sarah pressed her palm to the cold stone, imagining his hand meeting hers through the barrier. I'll come back for you, somehow. I know. Now run. She ran. Through the left passage, as he'd said, stumbling in the dying candlelight. The voices behind grew louder, but she knew the maze now, could feel the flow of air that meant outside. Her ankles shrieked with every step, but she pushed through the pain. The exit appeared as a gray gleam in the darkness. Sarah burst out onto a narrow beach beside the underground river. Snow still fell, but softer now, and the light was fading toward evening. North, Jack had said. She limped along the water's edge, using a driftwood branch as a crutch. Every step took her farther from him, and every step tore at her heart. But she moved forward because he'd asked her to, because their love demanded she survive even if he couldn't. Hours passed in a blur of pain and determination. The gorge widened, the river calmed. Sarah found a shallow cave, really just an overhang, and collapsed beneath it. She was soaked, freezing, probably dying, but she'd done as Jack asked. She'd run. She'd survived. As darkness fell, she built a tiny fire with shaking hands, using skills Jack had taught her. The smoke might draw pursuit, but without warmth, she'd be dead by morning anyway. She huddled close to the flames, finally allowing herself to weep. Somewhere in the mountain, Jack was captured or dead. Elwood had won. The price of her freedom was the man who'd shown her what love could be.
Not for nothing, she whispered to the fire. I swear to you, Jack, not for nothing.
She thought of his hands carving by firelight, his laugh when she'd made coffee too strong, the way he'd looked at her like she was precious beyond measure. Those memories would have to sustain her now, would have to be enough to build a new life on. The fire burned low as exhaustion claimed her. Sarah's last conscious thought was a prayer, not to the God of her childhood, but to the wild spirit of these mountains. Keep him safe, she begged. Keep him alive. Let there be a miracle waiting when I'm strong enough to come back for him. In the distance, wolves howled. Not hunting cries, but something almost mournful, as if the mountains themselves grieved for love separated by stone and greed. Sarah slept fitfully, dreams full of avalanches and reaching hands, while snow continued to fall, gentle as forgiveness, cold as goodbye. Sarah woke to gentle hands and a woman's voice speaking in accented English. Easy now. Dear, you're safe. She was in a bed, an actual bed with clean sheets, in a small, warm room. An older woman with graying hair and kind eyes sat beside her, pressing a cup to Sarah's lips. The liquid was bitter, but warming. Where? Sarah's voice came out as a croak.
You're in Haven, dear.
Little settlement about 10 miles from where my husband found you by the river, near frozen to death. You were. The woman patted her hand.
I'm Mrs. Elena Vasquez. You've been fevering for 3 days.
3 days. Sarah struggled to sit up, panic flooding through her.
I have to go back. There's a man. Hush now.
Mrs. Vasquez gently pushed her back. You're in no condition to go anywhere. That ankle of yours is badly sprained, and you're lucky to have kept all your fingers and toes. Whatever happened out there, it nearly killed you. Sarah closed her eyes, Jack's face swimming in her memory. Was he alive? Had Elwood shown mercy? She knew the answer. Elwood had never shown mercy to anyone who defied him.
There now,
Mrs. Vasquez said, misreading her tears. You're safe here. Haven's not on any official maps. We mind our own business and expect others to do the same. Nobody's going to find you unless you want to be found. Over the following days, Sarah learned about Haven. It was indeed unmapped, a small community of perhaps 30 souls who'd chosen isolation for various reasons. Former slaves, mixed-race families, women fleeing bad marriages, men dodging conscription or debts. Everyone had a story, and nobody asked questions they wouldn't want answered themselves. Mrs. Vasquez and her husband Ramon ran the general store and served as informal leaders. They'd given Sarah a small room above the store, asking no payment until she was well enough to work. You were calling for someone in your fever. Mrs. Vasquez mentioned one evening as Sarah helped sort supplies with her good hand. Jack, is he the reason you were running? Sarah's hand stilled on the fabric bolts. He saved my life, got trapped in a cave-in while helping me escape my husband. Ah, the older woman's face showed understanding. A bad marriage. Then, we see that here sometimes. Women arrive with nothing but bruises and determination. It wasn't just bad, it was... Sarah searched for words. Like being buried alive? Jack showed me I could breathe again, and now he's gone because of me. You don't know that. Mountains keep their secrets, but they also protect those who respect them. Your Jack might have found another way out. Sarah wanted to believe it, but she'd heard the voices in the tunnel, seen the determination in Elwood's eyes. Still, without proof of Jack's death, hope flickered like a candle in her chest. As her body healed, Sarah threw herself into life in Haven. She helped in the store, mended clothes, taught the settlement's few children their letters. Her false name, Sarah Meadows, felt strange on her tongue, but everyone here had chosen new identities. She cut her hair short, wore simple dresses that Elena's daughter had outgrown, and slowly built a new life from the ashes of the old. But at night, she dreamed of blue-green eyes and whispered promises. Sometimes she'd wake thinking she'd heard that low whistle that had once turned away a grizzly, only to find it was wind through the shutters. 6 weeks after her arrival, Sarah was sweeping the store's front steps when she saw him, a lone rider coming down the mountain trail, moving with familiar grace despite obvious exhaustion. Her broom clattered to the ground. Jack! He raised his head at her voice, and even from a distance, she could see his smile. Then she was running, bad ankle forgotten, throwing herself at him as he dismounted. He caught her, held her, real and solid and alive. How? She pulled back to study him, hands mapping his face as if to confirm he wasn't a dream. He was thinner, sporting new scars, but breathing. I heard them coming. The cave-in is a long story. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. The short version is that Kogan's men dug me out, but a snowslide on the way down gave me a chance to escape. I've been healing with a Blackfoot band who found me half dead. Soon as I could ride, I started looking for you. But how did you find me here? His smile widened. Followed the river north, just like I told you. Asked at every settlement about a woman with violet eyes and spirit like wildfire. Folks in Haven might keep secrets, but they remember kindness. Mrs. Vasquez sent word through the mountain network. Sarah laughed through her tears, then sobered. Elwood believes we're both dead. The slide took out 2 of his men. He called off the search, went back to his ranch. Jack's expression hardened. I made sure of it before coming here. Had friends check. He's already courting another widow from Billings. Let her have him. Sarah pressed closer, breathing in the scent of leather and pine that meant home. I have everything I want right here. They were married 3 days later in the town's small chapel. Ramon Vasquez officiated, having some authority in the territory, and the entire settlement turned out to witness. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Elena had embroidered with small violets at the hem, a detail that made her cry and laugh simultaneously. There were no legal documents, no official registry. In the eyes of the law, Sarah was still Mrs. Elwood Hartley. But in Haven, in the eyes of the people who mattered, she was Sarah Redfern, wife to Jack, free woman, survivor. Their wedding night was spent in a cabin at the settlement's edge, a gift from the community, who'd repaired an abandoned dwelling for the newlyweds. As Jack built up the fire, Sarah watched the play of light on his face, marveling that they were here, together, alive against all odds. Do you miss it? She asked. Your mountain, your old life. Jack turned from the fire, crossing to where she sat on their new bed. That wasn't living, Sarah. That was hiding. What we have now, this is life. He kissed her then, gentle and thorough, and Sarah felt the last of her fears melt away. They had survived Elwood's wrath, the mountain's fury, separation that should have been permanent. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Later, as they lay entwined in the firelight, Jack traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I have something for you." He reached for his pack, pulling out a familiar piece of fabric. "Found it when I went back to check the cave after the thaw." It was her violet handkerchief, the one she'd left as a sign of hope, dirty and torn but recognizable. Sarah clutched it to her chest, overcome. "I thought I'd lost everything from before," she whispered. "Not everything." Jack kissed her temple. "You brought yourself out of that life. Your courage, your strength, your heart. Those were never his. Sarah, they were always yours." Outside their cabin, snow began to fall again, but inside was warmth and safety and love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, building a life in a community of outcasts, always watching for strangers who might recognize them, creating something permanent from their fragile freedom. But tonight, Sarah Redfern lay in her husband's arms and felt truly married for the first time in her life, not bound by law or duty or survival, but by choice, free choice, freely given, as solid as the mountains that had brought them together and as enduring as the love that had survived every attempt to destroy it. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "And I love you," Jack replied, "today, tomorrow, and all the days after, whatever comes." Sarah smiled, pulling his arm tighter around her. Whatever comes, it sounded like a promise, like a future, like everything she'd never dared dream when she stood in that courthouse in a faded morning dress and signed away her freedom. Now she'd signed it back, written in courage and paid for in fear, but ultimately won through faith in something greater than safety. Love had asked everything of her, and she'd given it gladly. And here, in a cabin at the edge of nowhere, in the arms of a man who'd risked all for her freedom, Sarah finally understood what it meant to be home. The violet handkerchief lay folded on the small table beside their bed, a reminder of where they'd been. But Sarah's eyes were on the window, where dawn would eventually break over their new life. The past was done. The future beckoned. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was eager to meet it. Spring came late to the mountains that year, but when it arrived, it transformed Haven into a paradise of wildflowers and rushing streams. Sarah stood in the doorway of their cabin, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Jack split wood in the morning sun. A year had passed since their reunion, a year of building a life stitch by stitch, board by board. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," Jack called, never breaking rhythm with the axe. "Elena says walking is good for the baby." Sarah smiled at his protectiveness. Ever since they discovered she was with child, Jack had treated her like spun glass, despite her protests that mountain women were made of sterner stuff. "Elena doesn't have to watch you go pale every time you stand too quick." He set down the axe, crossing to wrap his arms around her from behind, hands gentle on her belly. "How's our little one this morning?" "Active. I think she's going to be a climber like her father." "She?" Jack nuzzled her neck. "You sound certain. Mother's intuition." Sarah leaned back into his warmth. "Though Tom always said I was terrible at guessing." The mention of her brother brought a familiar pang. They'd had no word of him since her flight, couldn't risk trying to contact him. She prayed he was safe, that Elwood had kept his word about leaving Tom alone, as if reading her thoughts. Jack tightened his hold. "He's smart. Your brother, he'll be fine." "I know. I just wish he could meet you properly. Meet his niece when she comes." "Someday," Jack promised. "When things are more settled. When Elwood's moved on completely." They stood together watching the sun climb higher, painting the mountains in shades of gold and green. Haven had embraced them fully. Jack trapped and hunted for the community, while Sarah had become the settlement's unofficial teacher and sometime midwife, learning from Elena. It was a good life, A quiet life, so different from the grand ranch she'd fled. "I need to check the trap lines," Jack said eventually. "Will you be all right?" "I've survived worse than a quiet morning," Sarah teased. "Go. We need the pelts for trade." He kissed her thoroughly before departing, a habit he'd developed as if each parting might be their last. Sarah understood the fear-happiness this complete felt fragile, like something that could be snatched away by jealous fate. The morning passed peacefully. Sarah tended their small garden, mended Jack's torn shirt, prepared stew for dinner. She was hanging washing when she heard horses approaching, multiple riders, moving fast. Her heart lurched as she recognized the lead figure. "Tom?" She dropped the wet sheet, moving as quickly as her condition allowed. "Tom!" Her brother practically fell from his horse, catching her in a fierce embrace. He was taller than she remembered, broader through the shoulders, but his eyes were the same, kind and worried and achingly familiar. "Sarah! My God! Sarah, you're alive!" He pulled back, taking in her short hair, her simple dress, her obvious pregnancy. "When Elwood said you died in a blizzard, I didn't believe it, but then months passed with no word." "How did you find me?" Sarah glanced nervously at the two men who'd accompanied him, but they looked travel-worn rather than threatening. "Wasn't easy. Followed rumors, mostly. Stories of a woman with violet eyes who'd survived impossible odds." Tom's expression grew serious. "Sarah, I have news. Several pieces of news. Can we talk somewhere private?" She led him into the cabin, settling him at their small table with water and bread. Her hands shook as she poured, sensing that her carefully built world was about to shift again. "First," Tom said, "Elwood's dead." The words hit like physical blows. Sarah sank into the opposite chair. "What? How?" "Horse threw him 6 weeks ago. Broke his neck. He lived long enough to make a will, leaving everything to his cousin in Chicago." Tom reached across to take her hands. "Sarah, you're free, legally, truly free. His death dissolves the marriage. But I'm already—" She gestured helplessly around the cabin, at the life she'd built. "I know. At least, I hoped." Tom squeezed her fingers. "The man who helped you escape, you're with him. We're married, not legally, but in every way that matters." Sarah touched her belly unconsciously. "This is his child?" Tom's face went through several expressions before settling on resigned acceptance. "I figured as much. Sarah, there's more. The cousin, Marcus Hartley, he's nothing like Elwood. When he came to settle the estate, he found your letter. He was appalled by what his cousin had done. He's offering you a settlement. I don't want Elwood's money. It's not his anymore. It's Marcus's. And he insists. Says it's only fair, given what you endured." Tom pulled out a leather folder. $5,000. Sarah, enough to build a real life anywhere you choose." Sarah stared at the documents, unable to process this reversal of fortune. "And you? The land?" "Mine free and clear. Marcus confirmed it." Tom's smile was sad. "I've done well, Sarah. The farm's thriving, but it wasn't worth losing you. You didn't lose me. I'm right here." "Are you?" He looked around the simple cabin. "This is what you want, a life in hiding." "I'm not hiding anymore. I'm living." Sarah stood as she heard Jack's whistle outside, their signal that all was well. "Come, meet my husband." Jack entered warily, taking in the strangers, relaxing only when Sarah smiled. "Jack, this is my brother Tom. Tom, Jack Redfern." The two men studied each other, Tom seeing the rough mountain man who'd stolen his sister, Jack seeing the boy whose future had been part of Sarah's chains. Then Tom extended his hand. "Thank you," he said simply, "for saving her when I couldn't." Jack shook the offered hand, some tension leaving his shoulders. "She saved herself. I just showed her the way." Over dinner, they talked, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Tom told them about the farm, about the girl he was courting, about his dreams of bringing more modern farming methods to Montana. Jack spoke of his plans to build a proper house before winter, maybe start a small ranch of their own. Sarah mostly listened, heart full to bursting at having her two worlds meet. As darkness fell, Tom's companions headed to the settlement's small inn, but he lingered. "There's one more thing," he said, pulling out a worn envelope. "The day after you left, a package came to the ranch from a law office in San Francisco. It was addressed to you, to Sarah Whitmore, not Hartley. I kept it, hoping." Sarah recognized William's careful script on the envelope immediately. Her first husband's handwriting, somehow reaching across death and distance. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "My dearest Sarah, if you are reading this, then the consumption has taken me as I feared it would. I write this in my clearer moments, wanting you to know truths I should have spoken while I lived. First, you brought me more joy in 2 years than most men see in a lifetime. Your laughter made my illness bearable. Your strength gave me courage. Your love transformed my final days from tragedy to grace. Second, I know the consumption has likely taken our savings, leaving you vulnerable. I pray you have not had to make choices that dim your spirit. Whatever you must do to survive, know that I understand and love you still. Third, I have a cousin in California, James Morrison, who owes me a considerable debt. The enclosed letter of introduction asks him to help you however he can. If you ever need sanctuary, he will provide it. Live. My darling Sarah, live fully and freely. Love again if your heart allows. You deserve every happiness this world can offer. Forever yours." William Sarah wept then for the gentle man who'd loved her first, for the difficult path that had led her here, for the strange circularity of receiving his blessing now, when she'd finally found the life he'd wanted for her. Jack held her while Tom stood awkwardly, unsure how to comfort a grief that was both old and new. When her tears slowed, Sarah showed them the letter. "He knew," she whispered. "Somehow, he knew I'd need to run." "Good man," Jack said quietly. "Wish I could have met him. You'd have liked each other." Sarah wiped her eyes, feeling a chapter close with gentle finality. "Tom, will you stay? A few days at least. I want you to see our life here, meet our friends." "I'd like that." Tom smiled. "Besides, someone needs to teach your husband proper farming. Can't have my niece growing up eating nothing but venison and wild berries." They talked late into the night, making plans. With Marcus Hartley's settlement and the security of Elwood's death, Jack and Sarah could stop looking over their shoulders. They could build openly now, maybe even visit Tom's farm eventually. The future, which had seemed fixed in patterns of hiding and fear, suddenly bloomed with possibilities. When Tom finally retired to the inn, Sarah and Jack sat by their fire, processing the day's revelations. "Do you want to leave Haven?" Jack asked. "We could go anywhere now. California, Oregon, even back east if you wanted." Sarah considered, then shook her head. "This is home. These people took us in when we had nothing. I won't abandon them now that we have choices." "My thoughts exactly." He pulled her close. "Though maybe we'll build that bigger house sooner than planned. Can't have Tom thinking I keep his sister in poverty." Sarah laughed, the sound free and unfettered. "Let him think what he likes. We know the truth, that love built this home, not money." As they prepared for bed, Sarah paused at the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. The same stars had witnessed her marriage to Elwood, her flight through winter storms, her reunion with Jack. Now they watched over a different woman, scarred but stronger, tested but triumphant. "Hope," she said suddenly. "What?" Jack joined her at the window. "The baby's name. Hope, for the future, for second chances, for everything we thought we'd lost but found again. Hope Redfern." Jack tested the name, smiling. "I like it, though if it's a boy." "It won't be," Sarah said with serene certainty. "She's going to be stubborn and wild and free, like her parents. God help us all." Jack laughed, pulling her back to bed. 6 weeks later, as summer reached its golden peak, Hope Redfern entered the world with a cry that could have woken the mountains. Tom was there, having extended his stay, along with Elena Vasquez and half the women of Haven. Jack paced outside like every expectant father since time began, wearing a path in the cabin's floorboards. When Elena finally called him in, Jack approached the bed with an expression of awe. Sarah, exhausted but radiant, held a tiny bundle of fierce life. "Your daughter," she said, transferring the precious weight to his arms. "Hope, meet your papa." Jack cradled his daughter with hands that could break a man's neck or gentle a spooked horse, tears running unashamed down his weathered cheeks. "She's perfect. Look at her. Sarah. She's absolutely perfect." Hope opened eyes that would later prove to be her father's blue-green, gazed at the world with a solemn curiosity, then yawned mightily. Everyone laughed, the sound filling the cabin with joy. Outside, the mountains stood eternal guard, having witnessed another chapter in the endless story of love and loss, bondage and freedom. Sarah had come to them as property, had nearly died in their embrace, but had emerged transformed. Now she was wife, mother, teacher, friend, all the things Elwood had tried to strip from her, returned threefold. That night, as their daughter slept between them, Jack and Sarah lay wakeful, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. "Was it worth it?" Jack asked softly. "Everything we went through?" Sarah looked at him, this man who'd shown her freedom, who'd risked everything for their love, who'd given her a life she hadn't dared dream. Then she looked at their daughter, promise of future generations who would never know the weight of being owned. "Every moment," she said, meaning it with her whole heart. "Every terrifying, painful, glorious moment, the stars wheeled overhead, constant as love, bright as hope." And in a small cabin at the edge of the world, the Redfern family slept peacefully, finally and forever free. Thank you for joining us around the campfire for this tale of love and freedom in the Old West. If you're listening to this story, we'd love to know where in the world you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's share this moment together. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more stories of courage, romance, and adventure from America's frontier days. What did you think of Sarah and Jack's journey? Share your thoughts in the comments. We read every one and love connecting with fellow lovers of Western tales. Until next time, partners, keep that campfire burning and those stories flowing.